Today we're going to talk about World War I, which took place between the years of 1914 and 1918. It's believed that there were three reasons behind the beginning of the World War I: imperialism, nationalism, and militarism. Imperialism is basic. One empire, one country is expanding. And if that country chooses to expand into the land of another country, this could cause conflict. Nationalism. Nationalism is when a person holds great national pride. They love their country, they're very proud of their country, and if anyone goes against their country, they get upset, almost like it's a personal attack. We would think that that's a positive to have national pride, but when it becomes sort of fanatical, it can be dangerous. And militarism. Militarism is when one country starts to build up its defenses, so it develops a bigger army or larger weapons, more powerful weapons. And other countries of equal size or smaller size think, we need to prepare our defenses to equal theirs just in case there's a conflict. So it's sort of whatever they have, we need to have. Whoa. Alright, and world conflicts are just like schoolyard conflicts. If you never have a conflict with just one person. If you have a fight with that person, it seems like everybody who is their friend or supports them, you're in a fight with as well. And this is what happens in countries across the world. There are alliances where certain countries ally with other countries, so they go to defend them if they are ever attacked. So here are, at this time, 1914 to 1918, the way the alliances broke out. So, in support of Germany were Austro-Hungarian, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Italy, Turkey. They were considered the Central Powers. That's what they were called. France was supported by the Russian Empire and Great Britain, and they were called the Allied Powers. So this is where the conflict begins. It started with imperialism. Austro-Hungarian Empire started to expand, and it started to expand into the Balkan region. The Serbian people in the Balkan region, who had national pride, started to get upset. And, there was that initiated a conflict. Then, on June 28, 1914, a Serbian nationalist, a bit of a fanatic, kills the heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So the future king is assassinated. This is obviously a huge conflict. And this leads to a chain of events which ultimately leads to World War I. So, Austria-Hungary blames the Serbian government because they feel that this was intentional, that it wasn't a fanatical citizen working on his own, it was organized by the government. The Serbian government says it wasn't us, so Austria-Hungarian Empire declares war on Serbia. And because Germany is allied with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they join the fight. Now, Russia and France decide, we're going to get into the fight. Germany says, oh no, you're not, stop what you're doing. They don't, so Germany declares war on Russia, and then the next day declares war on France. So, and the conflict continues. So during the battle, Germany then declares war on Belgium, because Belgium is in between Germany and France, and they thought that they could sneak up on France by going through Belgium. Well, Belgium is neutral. It doesn't have any alliances, and they were caught completely off guard. So Great Britain decides, hey, that wasn't fair. So Great Britain then declares war on Germany. Now, being a part of the British Empire, when Great Britain goes to war, so does Canada. Alright, so Canada is now going to war because it's sort of we are legally at war because we are part of the British Empire. We weren't asked, it wasn't a choice, it was just if Great Britain was going to war, so was Canada. But we're a developing country. We have very limited defenses and a very small army. Only 3,000 are in the army. There's 50,000 in the militia, which are sort of a citizen army. They haven't really had any formal training and they've never seen real combat. We have 2 ancient cruisers and a very small navy. But we have a lot of pride and connection to Great Britain. So when the call goes out that Canada is going to war to support sort of its mother country of Great Britain, 32,000 people, men, volunteer. More volunteer over the course of the war, but right from the beginning, there's a huge support for this conflict and to get involved. Now, Now, with all of these people leaving, and it still being a developing country, a war is very expensive. And so to pay for a war, the government has to make some changes and has to increase its power in order to gain resources and wealth to pay for this war. So at this time they implemented the War Measures Act of 1914. And one of the major parts of this act was they gave the cabinet in the government a lot of power. And some of their powers were, they had the power to arrest, intern, or deport anyone from Canada back to another country. They had the power to control all natural resources, restrict travel, and increase taxes. So if there were any resources that they felt would help to manufacture something for the war or could be used for the soldiers, they now were in control of it. If they felt, they restricted travel, so you couldn't return to Europe, travel between provinces was restricted. And they increased taxes. They needed to get money to pay for this war and pay for the soldiers, so they started to tax things that everybody used, like coffee and flour and sugar, to get sort of some wealth so they could pay for the war. And they also established internment camps. So if someone was thought of as an alien enemy, so came from a country that maybe was in conflict with Great Britain back in Europe, they could be arrested and questioned. And they would be put into these intern camps during the time period of the war as a way of watching them. Because who knows, they might be spying for their mother country back in Europe while they're in Canada. During the time of World War I, 8,579 citizens, Canadian citizens, were put in internment camps. They were mostly Ukrainian. They were families, men, women, children, and they were put in these camps for the duration of the war. Now, during the time of World War I, it drastically increased Canadian nationalism. People had a lot of pride. They felt like they were working towards something. They were supporting Great Britain. They were being recognized in the world as being a part of this conflict and having, defenses and people fighting, and we were starting to be recognized as our own country. So there was a lot of pride back in Canada. The workforce changed. Men, women, and children all worked together. Now, because there was a huge population of men who had left and had gone to fight, a lot of older men who had retired from the workforce returned to the workforce. A lot of women, 20,000 during this time period, went to factories and took on jobs that were usually held by men. And children, even in school, were doing things like knitting mittens and hats to send to the soldiers. Everyone was sort of coming together for this cause. Industry. That secondary industry of manufacturing was booming. Weapons, ammunition, uniforms, tinned meat, these were all things that were needed for the war. So if you could find a way to manufacture these goods, your business was booming. Now, the outcomes of World War I were victory bonds. The government needed money, and it had to pay for this ammunition and weapons that they were building. And so it started to go into debt. So it created some initiatives, some things like victory bonds. We call them savings bonds today, where the average citizen could go into a bank and purchase a victory bond. And it would be held by the bank for 5 years. And in that time, the government could use that money to pay for weapons, pay for ammunition, pay for soldiers. And after the 5 years, you would go and retrieve your victory bond and you would be given some interest as a sort of thank you for investing this money. Citizens were also able to donate money to the cause, and many did. There was also the implementation of an income tax. So that whenever someone's income, so they went to work and they had a job, the government would tax and take a certain portion of their income to go towards the government to pay off the debt that resulted from the war. It was supposed to be a temporary tax, but as you know, income tax is still alive and well today. Women's rights. There was an increase in awareness around the role of women, and that women could work outside of the home and could work alongside men and could do a lot of the jobs that men were doing previous. And this would lead to the women's rights movement and the right to vote and equality in the workplace. And again, like I talked about, nationalism. There was a great pride, and almost like the battle of, in 1812 when it brought Ontario East and West together for the first time, unified them. World War I really brought all of Canada together. Everyone was working and supporting this cause. But ultimately, at the end of the war, in 1918, the government was left with a $1.3 billion debt.